Hey, 7th graders, I believe you guys have a quiz coming up. If not, this is still just good practice in general. I'm going to try to go through these pretty quickly. The big thing is to make sure that you understand how to solve them and that you're not just copying down my answers, okay? Alright, so the first two questions are just kind of making you think a little bit. Number one says, what's the difference between an equation and an expression? Well, an equation is going to have an equal sign with it because there's two sides to it. And in an equation, you have enough information to actually solve for what's there most of the time. And in an expression, there is no equal sign. And in an expression, so since there's not an equal sign, we don't know what it's supposed to equal. So there's not enough information for us to solve it. So we still don't know what x or y or z or anything is. All we can do is simplify. That's it. Alright, so when you are simplifying an expression, or if we have an equation where one of the sides needs simplified, there's two things that we need to do. The first thing that we need to do is get rid of parentheses by distributing. Excuse my sloppy handwriting. Distributing. Okay, so you should know the distributive property. If not, we'll practice that in a minute. So the first thing, I want to get rid of any parentheses there is by distributing whatever's out front. And then the second thing we're going to do is we're going to combine like terms. So if there's no more terms to combine and there's no more parentheses, then our expression or our one side of an equation should be simplified. Alright, so number 3 is all about simplifying. Notice there's no equal signs there, so we have no clue what all of that is supposed to equal. So the only thing that we can do is simplify. Letter A, this would be a problem where we need to distribute because you see the 4 is in front of a parentheses without any plus or minuses. So I'm going to take this 4 and I'm going to distribute it to every term inside by multiplication. So 4 times x is 4x. And that plus, I kind of think of that as like a plus 6 or a positive 6. 4 times positive 6 is positive 24. And they are not like terms, so that is all I can do. They are totally simplified. Letter B, there's a negative 2 out front this time. So I'm going to distribute the negative 2 to everything. Well, negative 2 times r is negative 2r. And negative 2 times positive 3 is a negative 6. Now I wrote that as a minus 6. You could also have written that as a plus negative 6 if you wish. Letter C, that is 3 times everything inside of there. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times a minus 4 or 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. And letter D, negative 6 times everything inside would be negative 6x. And then this is the tricky one. It's a negative 6 and a minus 5. So I kind of think of that as negative 5. A negative times a negative is positive, so that's going to end up being actually plus 30. Or if you kept the minus, it would be a minus a negative 30. But remember, a minus a negative is plus positive anyway, so it's still really just plus 30. The last two, there's no parentheses, but there are like terms. So in letter E, the 3x and the minus x can be combined together to become a 2x. And the plus 5 and the plus 2 can be combined together to be a plus 7. So that's it. That's all that I can simplify there. And letter F, I have a negative 5b, positive 3b, and another positive b, which really is like a positive 1b. So negative 5 plus 3 is negative 2. Negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1b. or you don't really need the 1 there. It could just be negative b. And then a negative 2 or a minus 2 and a positive 10 is plus 8. So those 6 problems would be just simplifying. I still don't know what x is, or r, or b, or whatever, because we don't have enough information. So that's all that you could do. So make sure you don't get those mixed up with equations, which we're going to do next. And here they are. So here is 4 of the equations that we need to solve. I'm going to go through them pretty quickly. If you have questions about them, you can always pause this and rewind, or you can ask your teacher or me or any other adult that you think might know how to do it, or a friend. All right, letter A, 3x plus 4 equals 19. So the first thing that I do, again, this is just a Mrs. Pierce thing, is I drop a line where my equal sign is. That just helps me to remember that there's 2 sides to an equation that I need to make sure that I do the same thing to. So my x is on the left here. I kind of usually like cover up that 3x, because then what I want to do is zero out this positive 4. So the inverse of adding 4 is subtracting 4, or I like to think the opposite of a positive 4 is a negative 4, and that will cancel each other out. So I'm going to do a negative 4 on the other side as well. Okay, I always draw a line there so that I can get myself organized. That leaves me with just a 3x on the left, and 19 and a negative 4 is 15 on the right. Then I'm going to divide everything by 3, because on the left, this will make a giant 1. Organizing everything up there for myself leaves me with 1x equals 5. And that is my final answer. Hopefully you circled your answer, sorry. And if I checked it, 3 times 5 is 15, and 15 plus 4 is 19, so it works out. Letter B, I'm going to drop my line, and I notice that my 5x is on the left, so I want to eliminate the 2 by adding a negative 2 or subtracting 2, whichever way you like to think of it. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. Now here's the tricky part. It's a negative 23, and you're subtracting 3. Or I like to think it's a negative 23 and I'm adding a negative 3. Well, look, if they're both negatives here, a negative and a minus sign, I am going to add them, so that's 25, and keep the negative sign, because that's really what we were doing. And then on the left, all we have is a 5x left. Now I am going to divide both sides by 5, and I'm doing that because that leaves me with a giant 1 there. Final answer then, I have 1x equals negative 5. Since negative 25 divided by 5 is negative 5. If I go up there and check, negative 5 times 5 is negative 25, and negative 25 and 2 positives is negative 23, so it works out. Letter C, I'm going to drop my line, and I notice that my x is on the left this time again. I'm going to add a negative 1 to both sides because that will eliminate my positive 1, or again, you can think of it as subtracting 1 if you would like, leaving me with a negative 4x on the left and 3 on the right. And then my last step here, I'm going to divide both sides by negative 4. Now here's the thing. I think I said in the directions on Schoology, you need to know what your teacher wants as far as how they want you to write this answer. 4 does not go into 3. So my answer is not pretty. It's not an integer. Actually, I don't think it's ugly. It's just not an integer. And since 4 doesn't go into 3, I'm just going to leave that as a fraction. I would bet most of your teachers would prefer that to be as a fraction. If you had divided it in your calculator, you would have put negative 3 divided by 4. Always top divided by bottom. And if you did that, you would get negative 0.75. They are the same thing. Just make sure you know how your teacher wants your answer, okay? Alright, letter D. Drop my line. I'm going to, this time my x is on the right, so I want to eliminate this positive 3, and I'm going to do that by adding a negative 3. 15 and negative 3 is 12. And I have a negative 2x left, so when I divide both sides by negative 2, that leaves me with x on the right and a negative 6 on the left. And that's the same thing. It doesn't matter which side x is on as long as they're equal. If I did go back and check, negative 6 times negative 2 is positive 12, and positive 12 plus 3 is 15. So that works out as well. Alright, so if you need to pause it and rewind it a little bit, make sure you have the right answers, but hopefully you're not just copying them. Make sure you're actually understanding the steps that I did. Here's the next 4 problems. I'm going to speed this up a little bit, but you can always rewind. I don't think you can do slow-mo on here. Maybe you can, but you can always rewind and go back if you don't know what I said. So I dropped my line. My x is on the left for this one, so I'm going to add 10 to both sides this time, because adding 10 would zero out a minus 10. And that leaves me with 3x on the left, 12 on the right. Divide both sides by 3, because that would give me a giant 1x. And that leaves me with x equals 4. 3 times 4 is 12, and 12 minus 10 is 2, so that works out. Alright, letter F, I'm going to drop my line. I'm going to add 3 both sides this time, because that will zero out my negative, or my minus 3, leaving me with 6x on the left. And be careful here, because now we have a negative 3, we have a negative sign and a positive sign. So since they're opposites, I am going to subtract. 15 minus 3 is 12, and I had more negatives than positives, so it's going to be negative 12. Then I'm going to divide both sides by 6, and that leaves me with x equals negative 2. 6 times negative 2 is negative 12, and negative 12 minus 3 is indeed negative 15, so I know that it works out. Letter G, drop my line. This time the x is on the right, so I'm going to add 8 to zero those out. Add 8. That leaves me with 15 equals negative 3x. I need to divide both sides by negative 3. That leaves me with 1x on the right, because a negative divided by a negative is positive, and a negative 5 on the left. Be careful with your positive negatives. Okay. Negative 5 times negative 3 is positive 15, and 15 minus 8 is 7, so it works out. Letter I, drop my line. I'm going to add 16 to both sides, because that will zero those out. Okay, on the left, again, here we go. I've got a negative and a positive, so since they're opposite signs, I'm going to subtract them. And 25 minus 16 is 9. And I do have more negatives again, so it's a negative 9 equals negative 2x. Divide both sides by negative 2. Now here again, 2 does not go into 9 a whole number of times, so I'm going to leave my answer as positive. Okay, I don't even know what I just said there because it was paused. So a negative divided by a negative is positive, which is why it's positive 9 halves. I prefer to leave it as 9 halves, but you need to know what your teacher wants. They might want you to go ahead and make that an a mixed number. 2 goes into 9 4 whole times, and there would be 1 half left over. So your teacher might want 4 1/2. They might want 9 halves. Or, if you divided it, it would be 4.5. So there's 3 ways to write that same number. Make sure you know what your teacher wants, okay? Alright, let's do the last ones quickly. If you didn't get these, you can always pause it before you move on. Okay, K and M have fractions. You should not be afraid of fractions. You do everything the same, whether there's fractions, decimals, integers, doesn't matter. So I still drop my line. I still notice that my x is right there on the left, so I'm going to do a negative 7 to both sides to eliminate this positive 7. That leaves me with 2/3 x equals 6. Now here's the deal, you've got 2 options. If you're allowed to use a calculator, you can, and you really are, just doing 2/3 divided by 2/3, and 6 divided by 2/3, because those cancel out, even if it's a fraction. When I divide by the same thing, it's still going to give me 1. Here's the thing over here, though. If I don't have a calculator, and you should all know how to do this anyway. What that says right now is 6 divided by 2/3. A while ago, you guys learned how to divide fractions, and so the first number stays the same. I'm going to change the division to a multiplication, and then I'm going to change my fraction by flipping it. So that would be 6 times 3/2. And remember, 6 is really 6 over 1, so that is going to leave me with 18/2, and 18/2 is 9. So that is my final answer. And 2/3 times 9 is 6, and 6 plus 7 is 13, so it works out. Letter M, I'm going to drop my line. I'm going to add 10 to both sides because I want to get that x by itself. And that is going to leave me with x over 4 equals 7. Now, x over 4, I could think of this two ways. It's really the same as 1/4 times x. So we could divide both sides by 1/4. Just like before, that really becomes 7 times 4 over 1, which is 28. Another way to think about that one is it was x over 4, or like divided by 4, and the opposite of dividing is multiplying. So I could have just multiplied both sides by 4, because check it out, there is a giant 1 right there. So either way, we still get 28 as our answer for that one. Alright, this last one, it looks hard, but really, we just have to simplify first. And if you're okay with question 2, you already know how to simplify. I'm going to distribute. 3 times x is 3x, 3 times 4 is 12, plus that 2x, notice I didn't distribute anything there, and then 3x and 2x is 5x. And by the way, we do have to do the parentheses first. We could not add the x's until we multiplied. So that's going to leave you with 5x plus 12 equals 7. Subtract 12 from both sides, or add a negative 12 to both sides. Leaves me with 5x equals negative 5. Divide both sides by 5, and we get x equals negative 1 as our final answer. Alright, so like I said before, if you have any questions, you can always rewind this. You can ask me, you can ask your math teacher, you can ask a friend, you can ask any other adult that might help you. But make sure you understand the process, because your questions on your test will not be the same thing. Alright? Good luck.